But everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing it.
The Tapper market. Starting to rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the horn of Africa.
But everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing it.
The Tapper market. Starting to rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the horn of Africa.
All right, new day, Friday. All right, so once again, thanks for coming on. As usual, this is Frank. I am your host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series aspect of WCC. Welcome back this morning. All right, so yeah, good morning, Lance. Good morning. How you doing, man? So thanks for coming on. So please share, like, subscribe. All right, so before we introduce the topic, as usual, what we do, I just want to say thanks to all of you that are tuning in, and to all of you that will watch the recording. Please share, please share, so that it can reach to many as we can. All right. So firstly, we want to say thank you to our subscriber, to our listener, and to those of you that are here, and to our patron, and to our monthly contributor and our regular contributor. We say thank you so much. And to those who take the time to go on our website to read our articles that are written there by great writers, we say thank you as well. Please continue to do as we continue to build this platform, as we continue to educate our people around the world, as we continue to uncover some of the ill behavior in society against African people, and as we continue to bring our solution to our problem, because it is only African people that can bring solution to their problem. It is only African people that can solve their problem. No one in this world that will solve African problem, because African problem are being caused by other people. So we cannot rely on other people to come and solve our problem. So it is unto us, African, to wake up and to solve our problem as we want it to be. So today's topic is called Ethiopia and Tigray Peace Talk Agreement. So why we want to talk about that, okay? Why we want to talk about that is very important that we talk about that. So we're not just going to talk about, oh yeah, they have peace agreement, you know, it be a long time coming and so forth and things, all right? But why it is important that we have to talk about it, all right? And then we're also going to look at Biden White House Undisclosed meeting with Putin, secret undisclosed meeting with Russia. Why is it important that we talk about it? Okay, so I'm not really going to dive into their agreement or what they discuss, or no, but there's a reason why I brought it out to discuss it, and for African as a whole in general, to see how things are being done behind the scene, and to also bring light to the African leaders in their stand. I just want to congratulate them and want to recommend them for taking the stand and becoming neutral and not taking a side of the Babylonian, of the Zionists, of the imperialists, right? Because the game is real. And that is what I thought is wise to bring it and to elaborate on it as well. Because get in mind, let me tell you something. What we're doing here, our African leaders, they're seeing it. Okay, they also see it. They're also listening, and they are taking measure. And they see these things and they listen to it, right? And they see some direction in it. So when you see the African leaders taking some stand, it's because of things that we are doing. All right. So some of the things that we're going to look at also that is not on here, we're going to look at Biden or US have vowed to remove Burkina Faso from the trade path. All right. The United States under Biden administration, not just under Biden, that is how the United States behave anyway. They have vowed to remove Burkina Faso, a small, tiny country in Africa. They have vowed to remove Burkina Faso from the trade path. And what is that trade path? It just means money. They have vowed not to give money to Burkina Faso. So why is it important that we have to talk about this? All right. And that is why I brought it. It's very important that we talk about it. And to be fair, I divided this topic into two parts. So this is part one today, and part two going to be next week. And the reason why I divided it is because it was going to be too long, and I didn't want to do that, and I might not touch some things because of time, so I have to divide it. So next week, we're going to talk something very crucial and very important. And it's next we're going to focus on the division of Africa. So it have come to a point where the United States and the US, and the EU have divided Africa between themselves. So this time around, so what they are trying to do is, because they are seeing African taking a very swift, measure, and African have come to discover the techniques and the tactics of America and Europe, or the West, so to speak. So time is running against them. So they have tried, right, to maintain their colony or to maintain places in Africa, right? So it's no longer holding, and they do not want to lose. So what the United States and Europe have done, because that is why they've been having these secret meetings around, all right? So it have come to a point where between the United States and Europe, Europe have taken a stand of the East African nation, all right? And then the United States have taken a stand of the West African nation, all right? And then some part of Central Africa. So that's how they have divided Africa, okay, among themselves. So this time around, because they're not going, they don't want to say that all the nations that colonized Africa, right, they maintain a position. If they do that, they will lose. As we have seen recently, what is happening in places in Africa where France have colonized. And what happened here is they have seen the uprise of African on the continent to where France are basing, right? Or France is basing. So what they have done is they don't want for France to be involved, okay, in these new tactics, because France cannot go in any part of Africa and succeed. So the United States and EU have told Africa, or let's just say Great Britain, right, so to speak, have told France to back off in this new movement. So if they succeed, right, if they succeed, then the rest of the European nations still succeed at the end of the day. So what they are trying to do here, right, is for other nations to just back off, all right, so that the two superpowers can take. And then once they succeed, and then the rest can come in. That is the new tactic. So I divided it into two parts. So next week I will be talking about that, and we're going to see how that's going to play in. All right. Now, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to discuss here is the undisclosed meeting between Russia and the United States. Why? Why did that happen? All right. So let's look into it. Okay. So this is the Wall Street Journal. Okay. So what's going to happen here, because I had it for so long, for a couple of days, not so long, for a couple of days. So they are telling me that my time is expired, that I need to be member or register and so forth. So as you can see, what they did here, they want me to become member, which of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give my money to the capitalists in this case. But I'm going to find a way to navigate around it so that we can, see how we can read it. So let me see here. All right, so I did pull out another one on my computer. So I will read it from my computer at some point, but you won't be seeing it. But yeah, so we just got to find a way to navigate around it. So they want me to log in, to pay them, to become a monthly contributor to them, which of course I'm not going to do that. Okay. All right. So let's see here what they say, what the communication is about. So as we speak, they already blocked it totally. So I don't know if, all right. So let's see here. All right. So we're going to read some part, and then I will see how I can navigate around it and read some. So it says senior White House official involved in undisclosed talk with top Putin aide. So let's see here. All right. Now, they said Washington, President Biden top national security advisor has engaged in recent months in confidential conversation with top aide to Russia, President Vladimir Putin, in an effort to reduce the risks of a border conflict over Ukraine and warn Moscow against using nuclear or other weapon of mass destruction. So, as we have seen here in the first part, it's not about ending a war in Ukraine. All right, that is not what the undisclosed meeting was about. All right, so let's continue here. In Ukraine, and warn Moscow of using nuclear or other weapon of mass destruction. So they said, the official said that U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has been in contact with Yuri Yushevko. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's a Russian name. So Yuri Yushevko, a foreign policy advisor to Mr. Putin. Mr. Sullivan also has spoken with his direct counterpart in the Russian government, Nikola Petrofsky. The official added, the aim has been to guard against the risks of escalation and keep communication channel to open and not to discuss a settlement of the war in Ukraine. You see here, not to discuss an end of the war in Ukraine. That was not it. But so I'm going to get around to see how I can read it. Okay. because they're saying I should become member, but there are key things in here that I want for us to talk about. So let's see here. All right, so the official said that U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has been in contact with Yuri Yushchuk, a foreign policy advisor to Mr. Putin. Mr. Sullivan also has spoken with his direct counterpart in the Russian government, Nikolai Pachovic. The official added, the aim has been to guard against the risks of escalating and keep communication channel open between the Russia and US, right? Open and not to discuss a settlement of the war in Ukraine, the official said. So the meeting, the purpose of the meeting, as clearly right here, but it did not disclose it. The purpose of the meeting was to prevent Putin from using nuclear weapon. That was the purpose of the meeting. But it was not for discussion of ending the war in Ukraine. That is why they stated clear. And it is not to discuss a settlement of the war in Ukraine, the official said. Now, asked whether Mr. Sullivan has engaged in an undisclosed conversation with Mevsov, this Russian is hard to pronounce, but Yushchuk or Petrushuk, I will just pronounce it that way. National Security Council spokesman Adriana Waxing, that is for the United States side, said people claim a lot of things and declined to comment on the meeting when the Wall Street Journal asked to disclose what was said. They didn't want to say anything like that. All right. So the unpublished discussion came as traditional diplomat contact between Washington and Moscow have dwindled down, and Mr. Putin and has added, and Mr. Putin and his aide have hinted he might resort to using nuclear arm. That was what it was for, okay? From using nuclear arm to protect Russian territory, as well as gain made in his invasion. Now, I will call that as well as gain made in his military tactic or military operation in Ukraine. I mean, we're going to use the language of the Babylonian when they go in other country. All right, they invade other country and they use the language of special military operation. That's the language of the Babylonians, the Zionists. So we're going to use that same language here as in referring to Putin in Ukraine. Okay. Now, so this meeting came about when Putin made a statement that he was going to use nuclear weapon to protect Russia territory by any means necessary into area or places in Ukraine that Russia had captured. She was going to use nuclear weapon if it come to that point. All right. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let me read right here. I want to take a point from here, and we're going to see the video as to the reason why, America is not up for any settlement in Ukraine. So this is what America said. The aim has been to guard against the risks of escalation and keep communication channel open and not to discuss a settlement of the war in Ukraine, the official said. Now, if you follow down, the United States also said the war between Russia and Ukraine, it will only be settled between Kyiv and Russia. All right. But here it is. How can this be if the United States is saying that they want to have a meeting with Putin, not to end a war in Ukraine, but to prevent Putin from using nuclear weapon. And Putin is saying the more the war go and the more the United States or outside influence get into the war, she's going to use nuclear weapon. All right? Now, here is the thing. This is why I want to bring it out. And I want to say bravo to the African leaders for taking stand. All right? Not on the side of the U.S., not on the side of Russia, but for being neutral and for taking their support, making treaty with Russia. Okay? Now, Nelson Mandela told us, your enemies, the United States enemy cannot be Africa enemies. Your enemies is not Africa enemies. And just because you are enemy to somebody, that does not mean we cannot establish a trade partner with that person. That's what Nelson Mandela told us, and that is why we're going to go. That is why we're going to go back. All right. Now, this is what I want to say. African leaders, thank you for taking a stand. Because the United States, how can the United States come to Africa and say we should take her side? And when the United States is when Africa is telling the United States to make peace with Russia and to take the sanction from on Russia, and the United States is saying they can't do it. But here it is. The United States has spent more money on the Ukraine conflict than the annual military budget of Russia. Let me repeat that again. The United States has spent more money into that war in Ukraine than the Russian military annual budget. The Russian annual military budget have been increased to $16 billion ruble for the upcoming 2023. And then they increased that to $16.5 billion in ruble for 2024 to 2025. Just because they don't even know whether this war will end. Okay? Now, compare that to the United States spending over $50 billion in Ukraine. So who wants for the war to stop? Okay? So how can the U.S. go to Africa to tell African leaders to support the U.S.? If you are the one fueling the war, you are the one putting gas into the war, how can your military support in Ukraine be more than the Russian annual budget military? Listen to this, folks. How can the U.S., since the beginning of the war, the U.S. has spent over $50 billion in Ukraine, more than the Russian annual military budget, $16 billion ruble. And they have increased that to $16.5 billion ruble, 2024 to 2025. So then, who is supporting the war here? And here the United States is making it clear. She does not want for the war to end in Ukraine because it's the business. If you are doing a business in Ukraine through war, why do you want to involve African in it? And then why do you want to stop African leaders from taking a stand? So, I want to make this clear. Let me take this out. We want to make this clear. All right? The reason why I brought this out is not really about how much the United States spend in Ukraine or what kind of talk they have with Putin. That's not my business. But I brought it out just to open the eyes of African and African leaders to continue to take their stand and not to support the Babylonians, or not to support the Zionists, or not to support the imperialists, or not to support the colonizer, because this is what they are doing behind closed door. So the meeting they have with Putin is not about ending the war in Ukraine, but it's about telling Putin not to use the nuclear weapon. But how will Putin now use it when you're spending over $50 billion in the war in Ukraine? More than the people's annual military budget. But here it is. You got $50 billion to spend, right? When African people in this country telling you, if you can use American taxpayer that amount to support war, then how about you use the American taxpayer to give a reparation? And you listing that, and you, Joe Biden, you don't support reparation, but you support proxy war in Ukraine. See the double standard. And then you want for African leaders to come on your side to agree with you. That is not going to happen. And I just want to say bravo to the African leaders for taking a stand. And that is why I brought this out, to let them know these are some of the things that are happening behind the scene, and continue to take the stand. Not on the side of the Babylonian, not on the side of the imperialists. Take your stand and trade with whosoever you want to trade with. Make business with whosoever you want to make business with in the interest of African people. Don't just make business, but make business in the interest of African people, in the interest of the African continent, and in the interest of your government. Not in the interest of the United States, no. Not in the interest of EU, no, we don't care. Take a stand. So this is what they are doing behind the scene. It is not about peace, folks. Now let's continue here on the next topic. I just brought this out to let African leaders aware of what is going on behind the scene. Now, the next topic here, which is very important that I want us to look at, is the United States removing Burkina Faso from the trade path. Okay? Now, the reason why I brought this, there was a Zambia vice president in 1952, when mostly African nations were still fighting for independence. And he made a statement and said, if we African leaders do not take our independence seriously, the colonizer will come back in a form, they will come back to colonize us in a form of capital, in a form of investment. And that is what's happening today. Okay? That is what's happening today. And this is where the United States and Great Britain, okay, have divided Africa among themselves. Because as we speak, Germany is not strong as she was. Okay? And Germany does not have a huge influence in Africa. All right? France, again, does not have any influence, any impact in Africa. Okay? Africans do not want France in Africa. Nation in Africa that was colonized, okay, and controlled by France does not want France in Africa. So that means even nation that was not colonized by France, right, does not even want France in Africa, so to speak. So Great Britain and the United States have discussed that, okay, but Germany is no longer powerful as she was, so they put Germany aside, and Germany does not even have influence on the African continent, so they put Germany aside. So they put France aside. Portugal does not have that influence there. They put Portugal aside. Okay? So the two colonizers that really have influence on the African continent, that really have military bases on the African continent, the two colonizers, the two enslavers, okay? The two beasts, the two enemies, okay? The United States and Great Britain. We will call them out. Okay? These are the two people that have huge influence on the African continent. So they told the rest of the colonizer, back off. When we succeed, then we will call you guys. That is why France is out. So as we speak right now, The United States is want to control West Africa. That's how they have divided. They divide the continent among themselves. Okay? All right, this time around. Now, Great Britain still have huge influence on the African continent and have bases there. So they are dealing mostly with nations or colonizers that have bases in Africa, and that's how they divide it now. So they use the East African nation mostly are controlled by UK government or UK military bases, and then the West African nation mostly are controlled by the United States military bases. Okay, that's how they have shared it. So now UK is controlling the whole eastern side with their bases, and the United States is controlling the whole west with their bases, and then the Central African Republic, mostly now, the United States too have gone into that with Chad, Cameroon, Niger on our side. Okay, they are going into those places now. That's how they have shared it. And that is why I divided this topic into two. Next week is really going to be epic. All right. So let's see what they have done to Burkina Faso. And as we speak, the reason why they did this, there's a reason. And as we speak on these tactics, the United States have called the West African head of states, the West African government, and they are about to have meeting in December. I think I spoke on this before. Okay. I spoke on this before. Months back, when it first came out, I spoke on it, that they were going to have meeting in December. And the meeting is going to be December 12th to the 13th. Okay? December 12th to the 13th. So, divide and conquer. Let me put the article out, and then I will get into it more. Okay, I'll get into it more. So let me put the article as we read down the line. So it says, U.S. to remove Burkina Faso from trade path, White House. Okay, U.S. to remove Burkina Faso from trade path. So they are using money. So first of all, let me say this to the African leaders. Do not buy into it. Okay, do not buy into this. Do not forsake Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is in Africa. Burkina Faso is part of the African continent. Burkina Faso is not just a nation, but Burkina Faso is Africa and is within the continent of Africa. It's within the continent of Africa. Do not allow the United States to take any recommendation over any African nation in Africa, and then you fall apart. That's the same thing they did to Libya, to Muammar Gaddafi, and you all sat down there, and they went in, they killed Gaddafi, and today they destroy Libya, and today no peace in Libya. Today, chaos in Libya. Today, the United States, through its effort, the people of Libya are suffering. No peace. The life they promised to get to the Libyan, they can't. The democracy they promised to get to the Libyan, they can't. The good life they promised to give to the Libyan, they can't. Let me make this clear. If African people in America here, okay, if African people in America here cannot get what they want from the United States government, how will they leave African in America here to go somewhere far on the African continent to go give the life they did not give to African in America, to go give it to African on the African continent? Does that make sense? You think they will? This is how the United States government have been lying to people, have been lying to the African continent. Do not allow them, for you African head of state, to go against Burkina Faso. Don't follow the money. Do not follow the money. Let's get into it. The United States will exclude Burkina Faso from a U.S.-African trade agreement, President Joe Biden said Wednesday, citing a lack of progress towards protecting of the rule of law and political plagiarism or pluralism. Now, what is that rule of law that the United States or President Joseph R. Biden want for Burkina Faso to practice? Since when have President Biden ever make effort on the African continent? Oh, okay, let's talk about this. If you can drop Burkina Faso from this, your so-called money that you want to give to African leaders, and you're talking about they lack the progress of rule of law or protecting human rights, are you going to give some of this same money to Cameroon? Are you going to give to this? Are you going to give this same money, some of this same money, to Pombia? Have Pombia protect human rights in Cameroon? Have Pombia protect or practice democracy in Cameroon? How can you be so hypocrite? How can you be so biased? But I understand this is how the colonialists practice. Pombia been in power for over 40 years because Pombia, before he became president, he was a prime minister for some years. So he has spent about 37 to 38 years as president. So both president and prime minister, these men have been in power for over 40 years. But the American government, Joe Biden, will send his money or support Pombia. That is not just it. Have you criticized Togo of not protecting human rights, of not protecting the Togolese? No. But by you coming with such statement against Burkina Faso, we know. You know just how they send statement to African in America here who refuse to be how they are being classified or taken advantage of. That is the same way they try to bully African nations on the African continent. You know the reason why they did not, or Joe Biden did not mention Mali in here, because they have seen that Mali have taken a stand. They have seen that even to the United Nations, Mali spoke and said, if France continue to violate us, we will use any means necessary that we can, because Mali have come to realize that the so-called UN cannot protect Mali. Because the time Mali went to the UN and launched complaint against France that France is using her airspace to support the terrorists, the United Nations came out to say Mali is killing her citizen, is ill-treating her citizen. And that's how recently Mali came out to say the United Nations is not listening to us. The United Nations is not an entity because it is controlled by the same empire. So we're going to take a stand. And by any means necessary, we will fight to protect Mali. The next time France, we see France playing over our airspace. So let's see here what they say about Burkina Faso. The announcement came after the Sahel state was rocked by 2 coups this year, following anger at failures to stem a 7 years jihadi insurgency that has claimed thousands of lives and driven nearly 2 million people from their homes. Now, this is my question to President Joe Biden or Joseph Arab Biden. Plus your money, man, there's your money. I don't think we really care. What we care here is freedom. If we have freedom, if we have total independence, we don't really care about us our money, because we will use our resources. We will sell our resources at an affordable price. We will sell our resources at the determination and self-independent and self-actualization and self-coordination of our resources, of Burkina Faso resources, to get more money than what you will give us to build our country. Now, if we so care about what coup have been taking place, because the military government in that nation or the president in that nation could not or cannot protect the people against the jihadi. Did you go to find out why there are coup d'etat? Because the people are tired. Did you go to find out the frustration of the people? Oh, so you support the millions of people that are being dead on a daily basis by jihadi. So you support the idea that millions of Burkinabes should die. And if they see it necessary to remove that president, to see how they can negotiate with people, and then you go against them. Now, this is why President Biden have gone against Burkina Faso. Because Burkina Faso will take the same stand Mali have taken. Burkina Faso will take the same stand Niger have taken to bring in Russian military to help. So that is why Joseph Arab Biden is saying she does not want to give money to Burkina Faso. Because how will she give money to Burkina Faso? And at the end, Burkina Faso may go in to bring in Russian military support. Folks, that's the underlying factors here. Because when the Malians drove out the French military, where did they go for support? Russia. When the Nigerians drove out the French military, where did they go for support again? Russia. In Chad, when they protest against the presence of the French military to leave, who were they calling on again? Russia. So you see here? So that is the game President Biden is playing. It's not because of the coup d'etat. Do you know how many coup d'etat have been taking place in Africa? And most of them have been Western back. Why did they say they can't send their support there? Oh, this coup d'etat is not Western back support. So that means it is not in the interest of the United States. So it is necessary for her to say, we do not want to send money. But I will say this to the Burkinabes. Take a stand. Manos plus the United States support or money is not still going to give freedom. What have been the freedom in Libya with the United States support? What is the freedom in Libya with the United States support? What is the independence in Libya with the United States support? What is the democracy in Libya with the United States support? With Joseph Arab Biden's support? What is the freedom in Libya? So that is just to say, with their support, it means chaos. With their support, it means looting of resources, because that is what they are doing in Libya right now. Looting the people resources, exploiting the people oil and gas. What is the peace in Libya? Oh, we're not just calling names or pointings. We are calling names and pointing because of what you have done on the African continent. Things that you have advocated for, it did not come to be fruitful, but rather chaos, death. Libya is an example. The last time we checked, we remember you were in Sudan. What is the peace in Sudan? What is the democracy in Sudan? What have your support in Sudan given to the Sudanese? To my African leaders, when you are coming here in December 12 to the 13th, when you are coming for this money, please, let it not be money that you will neglect your African nations, that you will neglect your African counterparts. So let's continue here. The U.S. has determined that the government of Burkina Faso has not met eligibility requirement under the African Growth and Opportunity Act. And Biden said on Wednesday that Washington will terminate the country designation as a beneficiary starting January 2023. So that is why they are coming. So December 12th to the 13th, they're going to convince African leaders. Then those that will agree to be puppets to Washington, D.C. or to Joe Biden, when they go back to their respective nations, by January or February or in 2023, they will not receive this check. This bad check. So those that will not agree, those that will want to stay neutral, they will not get this check. So when they come in December, they're not going to give them this check. They will not give them the check. But those that will agree to be puppets, those that will agree to be on the United States side, those that will agree to say, oh, for example, my country is Liberia. I don't care what happened in Ghana. I don't care what happened in Burkina Faso, in Niger. I don't care what happened in Nigeria or in Ghana or in Africa or in Guinea. I will take this money. I will look after my country. But your country is on the African continent. What affect Ivorian or people in Africa, it affect Liberia or people in Liberia. What affects Sierra Leone, it affect people in Liberia. I'm using Liberia because that is what came to mind. But equally so, what affect Liberia, it affect Africa. So if the Ivorian leader decide to take this money, okay? So when you are coming, think about the African continent. Because these people, these Westerners, these colonizers, when they are doing things, they do it together. I just laid a premise as to what is taking place in Africa right now. Okay? They try for the colonizer to take their prospective nations, but that is not happening. So what they are trying to do now is to narrow it down to two nations, the United States and Great Britain. Because these are the two countries that have military power or bases on the African continent at the most. Okay? So in their new tactics of the scramble of Africa, they have tried in so many ways. It is not happening. So they have narrowed it down in a new scramble for Africa. So they have narrowed it down. So African leaders, this is not about money. If we do not take care of our independence, the colonizer will use financial means to get hold of us, to control us in their new tactics of the scramble for Africa. So when you come here, all of you come together, because I know you're still going to come. It level mean I don't support you guys coming, because we already know what a meeting is about. It is not about any good agreement between the United States and African nation. It is about control. It is about conquer. It is about dividing. It is about not seeing yourself as a continent. It is about seeing yourself as a nation within the continent. That is what it is for. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but that is what it is for. And that is why they are saying they do not want Burkina Faso. They are removing Burkina Faso from the trade. How can you remove Burkina Faso if truly you stand for humanity? 2 million people have been dead. Nearly 2 million people have been dead in Burkina Faso just because of the jihadi. Because of the government that was in power that was not protecting the people. They saw it necessary to remove this government to see what they can go and find help. Because it has been clear that Western influence on the African continent with their bases all around, it has been clear that these jihadi, these terrorists, they are getting external support in the African nation. How can the jihadi get more sophisticated weapon than the military? The military are suffering from weapon, but the jihadi, the terrorists get modern weapon. Where these modern weapons are coming from? Who are the supporters? Of course, we know. For typical example, the Tigray war with the Ethiopian. We know who been supporting it. It has been reported or believed that the United States government have been supporting the Tigray, the TPLF rebel in Ethiopia. So that tells you who support these terrorist activities on the African continent. That tells you how these terror or ISIS groups have the most sophisticated weapon. When they cannot face those sophisticated weapons on the African continent, how are they getting it? And that is why you African leaders need to make sure all these foreign military bases on the African continent leave. Because this is how they find it easy to support these terrorist groups. For a typical example, you saw what happened in Mali. All throughout, when the French military was in Mali, we were hearing about terrorist activities on the military bases, terrorist attacking the Malian military bases. We were not hearing that. We were not hearing that the Malian army were killing innocent civilian. We were not hearing that. But the moment they took away the French government or the French authority or the French military, what happened? The terrorist groups start launching the Malian bases. They start using drones. Who giving the drones to the terrorists? But again, we put a blame on you African leaders for inviting the United States to have military all on the African continent, for inviting Great Britain to have military bases all on the African continent, for inviting the colonizer, for inviting the enslaver, because their agenda is still the same. Their agenda never changed. So, again, this is just to expose them before you come. Okay? If the United States actually stand for human rights, if the United States actually stand for the rule of law, I think she's supposed to support Burkina Faso or do investigation as to why military coup d'etat. Nearly 2 million people have been dead in this country. Don't you think they want peace? Don't you think that they are saying that the only way they can remove this government is through coup? Because no elections. Is this not a time, if you show you stand for humanity, to support the people of Burkina Faso? But you are not there for peace. Because why? Typical example is Libya. Up to today, Libya had peace. But up to the time you went there, 2011, Libya have not seen peace. And Libya do not even know what they call peace. You put in a government that this government does not even want election. Because if there's an election today, the government you put in will lose the election. So you, along with the United Nations, support this government through military aid and supply to fight whosoever that may come to rise up against this government. That's just a typical example. You are not up for humanity or democracy. Because until you can give the Libyan people democracy, the democracy that they never had under Gaddafi that you so speak of, the kind of life that they never had under Gaddafi that you so speak of, the livelihood that you want to give them that they never had under Gaddafi that you so speak of, until you can give it to them, the moral Libya that you want to be that was never under Gaddafi that you so speak of, until you can give it to them. Anytime you make a move in Africa, we know exactly you are a patriarchal liars and deceiving nation to the African continent. This is Africa and African leaders. This is the sole reason why Joseph Arab Biden, the imperialist, is saying they do not want to support Burkina Faso because they have seen that exactly the path Burkina Faso is going to take. They're going to bring in the Russian military. They're going to get support from Russia. Of course, where you expect the people to go? They either go two places. They either go to Russia or they go to China. They cannot drive out another colonizer and go bring in another colonizer. They cannot drive out another enslaver or an enslaver and then go bring in another enslaver. It will not happen. So the United States have seen it clear that Burkina Faso will not come to her because she is another enslaver, she is another colonizer, and she knows that Burkina Faso is aware that the United States carry the same agenda as France. She knows that Burkina Faso, they are aware that the United States carry the same agenda as Great Britain. So she knows exactly that the Burkina B will not come to her. They will not go to Great Britain. Who they will go to? They either go to China for military support or they go to Russia for military support. So they have seen that clear. That is the reason why they do not want to support Burkina Faso, because it is not in their interest. They're not going to give money to a nation that will not be in their interest, to anybody that will not be in their interest. Why would they go and put their money there? Because it is clear. She is another enslaver. She is another colonizer. She is another oppressor. She is another fake liar. Today, there is no peace in Libya. That's what makes the United States a fake and a liar, because no peace in Libya today. The Libyans are even regretting that if they knew they were going to fight alongside with Gaddafi, even the rebel that wants the United States supported with ammunition, they are even regretting. Most of them are regretting today. Why did they go against Gaddafi? Why did they accept the West? Why did they accept the imperialists? Why did they accept the Babylonian and then go against Gaddafi? Today, Libya is a no-go zone. Today, Libya is a ghost town. Today, Libya is a zombie land under the American government democracy. So African leaders, when you are coming December 12th to the 13th, this is what you are coming for. Okay? They are coming. When you come, Joseph Arab Biden going to tell you not to coordinate in Africa. They're going to tell you, in fact, that's going to be the message that they're going to tell you. Any nation in Africa that carry coup, do not support them. That's what they're going to tell you. Nation in Africa that carry coup without the support of the West, do not support them. That is what they're going to tell you. Are you going to agree when you come? Because that's the message Joseph Arab Biden get for you when you come. And then those of you that will agree, when you go back, they will send you a check. So that check, they are saying that they do not want to give to Burkina Faso. That's a check they're going to give to you when you come and you agree what the United States policy wants you to do, if you agree, then by the time you return to your prospective nations, they will send your check. Okay? They will send your check. They're not going, your check will not be given to you when you come. But when you agree that you uphold truly, or you hold truly to the American policy or to Washington, D.C. policy, okay, that what they want you to do, your check will come. Your check will follow you by the time you get in 2023. Your check will come. But just make sure it is not about you. Just make sure it is about the African continent. Just make sure it is about the next generation. It is not about you. Just make sure it is not about Liberia. Just make sure it is not about Ghana. Just make sure it is not about Nigeria. Just make sure it is not about South Africa. It is not about Senegal. It is not about Benin. It is not about Mauritania. It is not about Zimbabwe. It is not about Lesotho. It is not about DRC Congo. It is not about how you call it, or Sudan, or South Sudan, or Mali, or you name the rest. It is not about them. It is not about Guinea. It is not about Sierra Leone. It is about the continent. It is not about individual nations. It is not about individual president. It is about the continent. Because as I can tell you right now, the United States is not operating on being about the United States. The United States is operating on being about North America. Okay? Because America know anything that affects Canada will affect her. Anything that affects Mexico, it will affect her. And anything that affects America, it will affect Mexico. Anything that affects America, it will affect Canada. So it is about South America, let's say North America. The EU know exactly the war in Ukraine, it is affecting the entire Europe. As we speak right now, it is affecting the entire Europe. That is why they all ran to the African continent for assistance. So when you coming and having Western meetings with these colonizers, just make sure it is not about individual nations. Just make sure it is about the African continent. We have to stand together. These colonizers have nothing that Africa don't have. What we have, that's what they want. The mineral resources is more than the paper money, is more than that money, the paper. Our resources cannot be depleted. Their money can be in fact, their money are failing. The US dollar is dropping. The pound dropping. Because why? Nations are now trading in their currency. Nations are not trading in the US dollar again. Nations are not trading in a European or currency again. Nations are not trading in their currency, and their currency value are going up. Do you know the value of the ruby right now, the Russian money? Because the Russians are selling their product in their currency. And the Chinese are doing the same thing now. The Iranians are doing the same thing now. In the Middle East, they are doing the same thing. That is why we Africans have to find a currency. We do not have specific currency. We do not have one currency. That is why we still believe in the US dollar. When they call us and we come, they give us the dollar and we take it. Because we do not have any currency yet. If to say Africa have her own currency, her own national bank, we will not be running to these so-called Babylonians when they call us. We will not do it. But that is the information. On the 12th, when you're meeting Joseph Arab Biden to the 13th, please, it is not about individual nations. Look, you guys should stand firm. You guys are leader. Lead the continent. Tell Joseph Arobading it is not about money this time. Tell him it is not about money this time around. It is about we African nations standing together. It is about our continent. It is about where we come from. It is not about the colonial bolus you give us. We have come to realize that those bolus are the causes of our current situation. That in many instances, we have neo-colonialists. Man, I can't wait to get in a Pan-African parliament. I can't wait. I can't wait. Because we will walk the talk. We will do the talk. We will work the talk. Let's continue here on the next page. This is the last one that we're going to talk about. The last one here is the peace agreement between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray rebel, the TPLF, that have been supported by the United States. A terrorist group in Ethiopia supported by the United States, money by American taxpayer. Let's continue here. Let me take this out. All right. It says, Ethiopian Civil War party agree on one end to hostility. All right, let's see here. You know what? Before that, I wanted to show something. Let me see if I can find it. I wanted to show something first. Anyway, let me just talk about this. If we still have time, I will try to get there. All right. So in recent time, the African leaders, I will say bravo to them. When they do good, we will say it. When they do bad, we say it. When they blunder, we will say it. When they make progress, we will say it. So in recent time, some African head of state headed to South Africa in peace agreement to end the war or the conflict in Ethiopia. So I'm just going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to play this video because there is something I want to talk about in this video. I also wanted to talk about it in the first article that we talked about with Russia and the United States having a secret meeting, but I might go there back because I want to show that video. So Ethiopia, one side, have formally agreed to a permanent cessation of hostility. An African Union Special Envoy said on Wednesday, bringing hope of an imminent end to a 2-year war that has displaced millions, and threatened to destabilize a swath of the continent. Now, first of all, I will say this. The reason why this war lasted for that long time or for that 2 years, and the reason why millions of people have been displaced is because of the influence of the United States. Oh, yes. Because if the TPLF rebel never had the support of the United States government, the support of American taxpayer, this war wouldn't have lasted for long. But they were getting support from the United States, so they were not backing off. So the United States is the cause. So these are some of the reasons African leaders too need to hold the United States accountable and take them to the war crime court or to the criminal court or to the war court and put allegation against the United States. The war lasted for so long because the United States supported the rebel, the terrorist group. And due to that, it had displaced millions of people. And due to that, it have killed millions of people because some people die from starvation. Some people die from disease, from illness. Some people die from malnutrition because they never had good lifestyle or good livelihood. And some people die from the war. Some people were being taken advantage of, raped due to the war. Because America has support in it too. Nigeria former President Olusegun Obasanjo, in a first briefing on the peace talk in Pretoria, South Africa, administrative capital, also said Ethiopia's government and Tigray authority had agreed on an orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament. In a statement released Wednesday evening, Abiy Ahmed, Ethiopia Prime Minister, described the agreement as momentum. He said, "Our commitment to peace remains steadfast, and our commitment to collaborating for the implementation of the agreement is equally strong." Now, let me make a very profound statement here. Why? And this is to open in the minds of African people. Why would the United States government support the TPLF instead of the government? Why would the United States government support terrorist group instead of the government? Because the government, I would say, was not a puppet government to the United States. And as long as government is not a puppet government in our country, the United States will find other means. If they are to support the political rivalry in our country, they will. If they are to support the opposition in our country, they will, and which we have seen in many nations in Africa. Today, even Liberia is a typical example. So that means the prime minister was for the people. That means the prime minister was not willing to be the puppet or to be a sellout. Now, to the African leaders again, bravo you having this meeting in South Africa to ease or to end the conflict in Ethiopia. What next? There are many conflicts on the African continent, not just Ethiopia. So this is a challenge to you. There is conflict in DRC Congo. Millions of people have died because of the influence of Great Britain, the influence of Belgium, the influence of America, the influence of Asia, Germany, all these colonizers, their influence. Even UN, the influence of UN, millions of people have died in DRC Congo because UN herself is there exploiting the resources. UN is a thief in DRC Congo. UN is a road in DRC Congo. Oh, yes. Once upon a time, a UN truck had an accident. And the report from that accident, just that one truck, the mineral resources that was in that truck was worth billions of dollars. What is the United Nations doing in DRC Congo if not for peace? Why are you doing the exploiting the people's resources to the extent you had an accident, and this accident that you had, it was not the WFP that was carrying food to the people. It was not how they call it, UNHCR that was carrying drugs to the people. It was not the United Nations army that was going to go protect the people, to go fight the terrorists or the rebel groups. No. But minimal resources that came from that truck. So African leaders, we want you to have the same peace talk agreement on behalf of DRC Congo. African leaders, we want you to have the same peace talk agreement in Sudan. African leaders, we want you to have the same peace talk agreement in Mali. We want you to have the same peace talk agreement in Burkina Faso. We want you to have the same peace talk agreement in Chad, in Niger. We want you to have the same peace talk agreement on the entire African continent. Because once upon a time, you promised us that by 2023, there will be the year of silence of gun on the African continent. Once upon a time, you told us that. And 2023 is right here. 2023 is right here. You told us that by 2023, the entire African continent will be silent of guns. That was your promise. African Union, you told us 2023 is right here. Stand by your promise. Stand by your promise. And by you standing by your promise, it also means the only way there will be a silence of gun on the African continent is by removing entirely the American military or bases on the African continent. They are useless on the African continent. They are not of good to the African people. It's by removing entirely the entire French military bases on the African continent. They are useless and not of good on the African continent. It's by removing entirely the British military bases on the African continent. They are useless and not useful to the African continent. They are the one supporting the air behavior on the African continent. When they were not there, when they never had their bases, we were not experiencing terrorist activity or jihadi or ISIS. They were in the Middle East. Who have access on the African continent? They are the funders and supporters of these terrorists. Why should you have military bases, foreign military bases on the African continent? If you say by 2023 will be the year of silence of gun on the African continent, we hold you to your word. And we want to see that. And that also means take out these foreign military bases on the African continent. They are using that as a means to create these proxy wars. Why are they there? If they are there to help Africa. But every day on a daily basis, thousands of people die in DRC Congo. Thousands of people die in Mali, in Senegal. I mean, not Senegal. Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso. No peace. They are the one. It was once reported by the Nigerian army that Médecins Sans Frontières, an NGO, French NGO, were the ones supporting the Boko Haram with medicine. Medically, they were supporting Boko Haram. Many times it has been reported that America supported the TPLF. Even some of their own government officials reported it, that they supported TPLF. All these are evidence or evidences that you have to withdraw these foreign military on the African continent. They are not African military. They are not African Marine. They are not African navies. They are not African CIA or FBI. They are foreign CIA. They are foreign FBI. They are foreign military. And they are there as a military to support or serve the purpose of their government. That we should know. I'm not going to read the whole article, but let me play this video here. I want to say something there. I want to say something.
Today is the beginning of a new dawn for Ethiopia, for the Horn of Africa, and indeed for Africa as a whole.
አሸናፊ ሆነን ሁለተኛ ልጆቻችን የማይደፍሩበት ሀገር እንፈጥራለን። እናንተ የምፈልገው ነገር
Since 31st of August, we have received numerous reports of civilian casualties and destruction of civilian objects due to airstrikes and artillery strikes in Tigray. Disruptions to communications make it particularly difficult to verify reports, but it is clear that the toll on civilians is utterly staggering.
I can tell you that the humanitarian crisis in Tigray is more than Ukraine. Nowhere on earth 6 million people are sealed off. Nowhere. From basic services, from their own money, from telecom, from food, from medicine.
But this is very much a welcome first step, which we hope.
Now, this so-called United Nations, the humanitarian crisis in Tigray is more than Ukraine. Oh, I see. But there have been more support, more attention in Ukraine than Tigray, than Ethiopia. So you see, Africans have made move of peace. These so-called hypocrites come in to pretend that they carry peace in Ethiopia. They make the move. You know what this means? It just shows that when African people in the United States or in the diaspora were gaining freedom from slavery, and then the white man came in a picture, and then they used that in various books to say it was the white man that gave freedom to the black man. It was Abraham Lincoln that gave freedom to the slavery. I mean, to the slave. Meanwhile, it was the slave that fought hard for their own freedom to the extent that they have to go on a battlefield for their own freedom. And some of them died there just for people to be free. And after the slave harassment, that the colonizer saw no way in and out, they have to come to a deal. They have to come to an agreement. And then they come and use one white man to come and say he gave peace. That's what happened here. All along, Ethiopia been calling for peace. All along, the Ethiopian people been calling for peace. Where were the United Nations? Where were the UNHCR? Where were them? Where were the United States government? Where were them? Where were the White House press secretary? Where were them? But the moment Africans have come together, sort out peace, then that's the time you see these faces come to claim glory. Y'all go and sit down somewhere else.
Can start to bring some solace to the millions of Ethiopian civilians that have really suffered
during this conflict.
Today we had an announcement. What we will have to see is follow through. and the United States will be there. We will be there to continue working with the African Union. They will continue to lead this process.
So did you see the hypocrite in there? Did you see that fake guy talking? The United States will continue. How will the United States continue when the United States have been the one supporting the rebel? So are you telling me the United States going to continue to monitor? Are you telling me the United States going to continue to monitor the government of Ethiopia in this peace agreement? If the government does not put in the interest of the United States, the United States will go back again and support the TPLF or the rebel? Are you telling me the United States will continue to monitor if the TPLF does not have part in the government to play, or if the TPLF does not have a major position in the government? The United States will go back again to support the TPLF to get in the breach or in the breaches to go fight war? Because long time you have been monitoring these things by supporting TPLF. Long time you have been against the Prime Minister of Ethiopia because she was not a puppet. Long time. And then they have peace agreement. Since when you start monitoring it? Since when have you put the TPLF and the Ethiopian government or authority together for peace talk? Since when? This is what you people do. After Africans have come together to do peace talk, and then now y'all want to come out to say you're part of it. You're now been part of it. You can never train people to come against me, and then later, when I fight to be free, then you come and say, we also have to free you. When you are the one that have been the cause of my defeat. But I never got defeated. I stood strong, and I became victorious. And then you want to come to claim glory that we help you. No. US, you fake. Stop doing that. And we're going to be calling upon you. When you right, we will say you right. If you do the good thing, we'll give you the praises. But if you do the bad thing, we'll tell you what you have done. The problem of Ethiopia is more than the problem in Ukraine. Bravo, you said it. But then why there have been no attention or much attention to the problem? Or because we are African? Or because we are black people? Or because we are not important, or because our color don't look like your color, in which of course you made it clear. African people are good for war. You made it clear when the war first started in Ukraine. When Putin went for her special military operation in Ukraine, you made it clear that white people not supposed to fight war. White hair, blonde hair, green hair, they are suffering their days. And you said African people or the Middle East, they are the people who are good at war. They are the people who war good for. They are the people who supposed to be fighting, not white people. Not blue hair, white eye, green or blue eye supposed to be fighting. They're not supposed to die. The African people are supposed to die because poverty is there. You said it. Those was your statement by your media. Now, let me make this clear. Where are the so-called Western media, the so-called CNN, BBC, ABC, all of them that reported the war in Ethiopia with the rebel? Those are the things that only report about Africa, bad stuff. So they used to report all kind of bad stuff. The war in Africa, in Ethiopia, is killing millions of people, is killing thousands of people, is this, is that, bad place. But now, this whole peace agreement, I have never seen it on CNN that this is what African people have done or AU have done. I have never seen it on their so-called BBC. I have never seen it on their so-called NBC. I have never seen it on all the media that reported about the war in Ethiopia, about the war in our region. I have never seen a report on it that this war have come to a still, this war have come to an end. I have never seen them make report about this is the progress African government have done. This is the progress AU have done. Again, it is a warning to the African leaders. These people are not good. They do not mean good for Africa. Whenever Africa is taking the right direction, they get hurt, they get better. And we're seeing that in the United States here. When African people in this country, in America here, take the right stand, they get angry. And that's the same thing happening on the African continent. Black people everywhere, situation are the same. The reason why it is the same, because it is being caused and perpetrated by the same people. So you African leaders, that is just an example. With this meeting, this Peter agreement you guys have, did you see BBC reporting on it? Did you see CNN reporting on it? Did you see any new channel in America here or in Europe reporting on it? Because it is not in their interest. It is not in their favor. Their interest here is to continue to create proxy war in Africa so that it will make Africa a destabilized continent that they will continue to exploit. Or these are their wars. If they allow Africa to rise, it means America will become a third world country. It means Europe will become a third world country. So they said it clear. They are not going to allow that to happen. They will continue to destabilize Africa. They will continue to create proxy wars in Africa. Those are their wars, and we are playing here several times. And that is why we are asking you African leaders to take out all American bases on the African continent, all European bases on the African continent. Get them out of the continent. You cannot be fighting for liberation. You cannot be fighting for true liberation if you have your enemy bases in your backyard. That's not liberation. You cannot be fighting for total liberation and you have your enemies bases in your backyard. How can that happen? You cannot be fighting for decolonization and you still serve the God your colonial master gave you. Simple. That is what we're saying here as well. You cannot be fighting for decolonization and you still serving the colonial master. You cannot be fighting for decolonization and your mind is not decolonized. That is not freedom, African leaders. You have American military in your backyard. You have European military in your backyard. And then you say you are fighting for decolonization. And then you say you are fighting for total liberation of Africa. How can you be fighting the enemies and you allow the enemy to have bases all around you? The enemy bases surround your bases. The enemy bases surround your military. And the enemy are well sophisticated than your military. And then you say you are fighting for total liberation of the African continent. How can that be? Technologies wise, they are more equipped than your military. And you have your enemies military that are well equipped than your military surrounding your military. And then you say you are fighting for total liberation. You in the middle. You go here, you will see American bases. You will see American military. You go here, you see how they call it, European bases, European military. Where are you going? You surround it. That is not how you fight to be liberated. When you are liberating, anything that have to do with the enemies, you get them out. None of them should be around you. Folks, we end here today. This is what I have to give. But next week, we will be here for part 2 of this. to talk about the East African nations. Because as we speak, the EU Parliament or England have gone and they have written a resolution to ban the Eastern African nations, okay, from extracting their resources. You see how insulting that is? How can Europe sit down in their country, Europeans sit down in their country, and then ban African from extracting their own resources in Africa? How can that be? You sit down in Europe, in your parliament, and you create resolution to ban Africans from extracting their resources that you have exploited for millions or for thousands of years, that you have built Europe, that even up to today, the queen, the gold she has stolen, she has surplus of it. Then today, you say you ban African from extracting their resources. I'll stop here, sir. I don't want to bring it up. Next week, we'll discuss that. Oh, man. Folks, this is today actually for the African leaders. Actually, today's presentation is for them to open their mind. It's for them to open their mind. Let me see here if I can bring something out here that I wanted to bring from the first video. I don't know if it will come out back. All right, let me see here. It's a video I want for them to play. Let them see this video here. I want them to see this video. Let me see. I want them to see this video here. Let them see this video.
What do cows have to do with the future of trucking? At Chevron, we're working with partners to turn the methane from cow waste into the fuels of the future. These are some of the storage units where Russia houses its atomic warheads. Satellite images are a key tool for the world to keep an eye on the nuclear sites dotted across the country. As Russian President Vladimir Putin suffers losses in Ukraine, he has suggested that he was ready to use his nuclear arsenal.
Мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф.
A nuclear strike is still widely seen as an unlikely scenario, but Western officials have said they are concerned, and President Biden warned the world could face the prospect of an Armageddon. So how would a Russian nuclear strike play out?
It's not like there is a big red button on the president's desk.
By looking at a map of Russia, we can learn a lot about how Putin would activate his atomic force. These dots represent the known locations where Russia houses some of its nuclear weapons. Bases like these have been identified by analysts who monitor nuclear arsenals using satellite images and other sources. The red ones indicate sites where tactical nuclear warheads are stored. Typically, these are lower-yield weapons used on delivery systems with a range under 310 miles. And the blue dots represent where some of Moscow's strategic weapons are deployed. These have more power and can travel up to about 9,000 miles. If Moscow decided to launch a nuclear attack, many Western and Ukrainian officials believe it would turn to tactical weapons.
Normally, it is assumed that strategic weapons are the last things you touch.
Hans Christensen is the director of the Nuclear Information Project and has been studying Russian nuclear weapons for decades.
The assumption is that tactical nuclear weapons, to the extent that they would escalate to nuclear use, would be the first that would be used.
Russia has 2,889 warheads in storage, according to American analysts. That's almost 1,000 more than the US. And even those tactical weapons can be very powerful and destructive. The RN-40 gravity bomb, carried in jets such as these, has the same estimated power as 30 kilotons of dynamite. That's more than the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, at about 15 to 20 kilotons, and much less than Russia's strategic weapons, These intercontinental ballistic missiles, for example, can have a yield of 300 to 800 kilotons. A strike using those weapons would be enough to destroy any major city, according to Christensen. If Russia was to actually deploy tactical nuclear weapons at these sites, it would first have to tackle some logistical challenges. That starts with retrieving the warheads from the storage bunkers or units that they're housed in.
Those weapons are all in storage facilities.
Pavel Podvig is a Geneva-based nuclear weapons expert who tracks Russian storage bases.
These are normally some distance from the delivery systems.
Take this site in Belgorod, near the border with Ukraine, for example. On a nuclear order, the site personnel would have to retrieve the warheads from bunkers. Then they would load them onto trucks in special climate-controlled containers and transport them to an airfield or designated point near a missile base like this one. Once they arrive, they would then need to be installed on a launcher or airplane. So actually deploying them for combat could take many hours or up to a few days, military analysts say. That whole process would be very hard to complete without other countries realizing, as movements are being tracked by intelligence teams, according to defense experts. So Russia appears to have taken steps to be less visible.
If you look at the satellite photos of these nuclear weapon storage sites, they typically have sort of a roof or a garage at the entrance. So any truck that drives up goes into this garage, so you can't see what they're loading on board.
But increasing the chances the message of a strike would spread is the multiple personnel involved along the way. The group responsible for Russia's nuclear weapons is a special unit called the 12th Chief Directorate. Analysts say the individuals in that force could potentially oppose strikes.
The military would be part of that process. They would have a chance at least to offer their opinion on that plan and whether it should go ahead.
If movement at the facilities was detected, the West could respond in a number of ways, according to military analysts. One scenario is that countries could target Moscow's storage bases, which carries huge risks, while another is imposing more sanctions. Strategic nuclear weapons like this intercontinental ballistic missile are even less likely to be used, but hypothetically, they would be much quicker to deploy.
They're standing in their silos, the missiles, or they're on board ballistic missile submarines, and they're loaded with nuclear warheads, ready to fly in a few minutes.
However, before any of that, Putin would need to actually order a strike, and there's a series of steps that need to take place within the Kremlin for that to happen. The process is secretive and hard to monitor, and could even have changed since the Ukraine war began. Defense analysts have made an educated guess how it would unfold, based on documents and sources.
The theory is that that there are three people that need to be involved in an actual launch of Russian nuclear weapons: the Russian president, Putin, and the Minister of Defense, and then also the chief of the armed forces. They're supposed to have three briefcases, so to speak, electronic communication devices they can use to activate the nuclear option.
Some defense experts believe that 2 out of 3 of those officials would need to agree for the strike to be carried out.
If that is in fact the setup, then it's very different from the American setup, where the president has the sole authority to launch this, and he doesn't need approval from anyone else.
In addition to the chain of command, Russia has a strategic planning document, or military doctrine, which lays out how nuclear weapons could be used. The document says it allows the use of nuclear weapons if they, or other types of weapons of mass destruction, are used against it, as well as in the event of aggression that threatens the existence of the Russian Federation. The interpretation of that document rests on the shoulders of Putin, who has already said the territorial integrity of Russia may be threatened, and has claimed the annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories. When asked if Russia could use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told the Wall Street Journal, "We consider such inflated nuclear rhetoric unacceptable." But with Moscow facing setbacks in Ukraine, officials and military analysts say the use of tactical weapons can't be completely ruled out.
All right, so you see that, so that is just a continuation of
With the S&P 500, your portfolio may be too concentrated.
That is just a continuation of the meeting, the secret meeting that took place between the White House and Putin. Okay, that's part of the secret meeting that took place there. And I just brought that to you. So what was said in our meeting, in our secret meeting, it was not about peace agreement in Ukraine. Okay, it was about how they can talk with Putin to prevent the use of nuclear weapon. It was not about any war in Ukraine, okay? Because as we all know, the United States is not going to spend over $50 billion, okay? Over $50 billion the United States has spent in Ukraine, more than the Russian annual military budget. The Russian annual military budget is $16 billion ruble, okay? And Putin have increased that to 16.5 billion for 2024 to 2025. So just from the time the war started, okay, in a year time, all right, the United States has spent over $50 billion. So the United States is not going to spend over that amount, right, and then lose, and then obviously then they go for peace talk, and then the war end. The United States have to get her money back through selling ammunition, proxy war, right? So the peace, the undisclosed meeting was not about peace talk in Ukraine, was about talking to Putin for Putin not to use nuclear weapon. Because Putin said, if any Russian territory is threatening, she will use nuclear arsenal. And when it comes to that point, Putin will use it. All right? So, from the video, you saw it that a special force, undercover detective, went in Russia to study, okay? To study this plan, to study Russia, right? Russia nuclear power, right? Now, African leaders, these African military on the African continent, they are there as spies. And at the same time, being there as spies, they are there to support the terrorists. They are there to create proxy wars. They are there to give ammunition to the terrorists. Again, you cannot be fighting for total liberation and you are surrounded by your enemies, especially their military. When you are not even sophisticated, when you are not even well equipped. Because the reason why they are there is for them to use their satellites so that they can monitor what you are doing, what you are discussing. That is why it is dangerous to have American military bases on the African continent. It is dangerous to have EU or England or Great Britain so-called military bases on the African continent. Why you think they are fighting? Why you think China will not allow American base to be in China? Even today as we speak, a little area called under the China Sea, the Chinese are fighting along with the American military because America want to have her base to that China Sea. And China said the sea is for them. They are fighting. Why you think China can't lie? Why you think America will not allow Chinese military to be established in America or any American territory or any American ocean or sea or landmass or airspace? Why you think they can't allow it? Why you think America will not allow even her ally, Great Britain, to come and have army on her territory, whether her airspace or her sea? Why you think America will not allow her own ally? Why you think so? Because it invade your prophecy. So why should we allow it? Even as weak Africa is, I'm saying this, as weak Africa is, right? As weak Africa is, America will not allow, as weak Africa is, America will not allow African base to be established in America here. As weak Africa is. Let me say this. The least military defense on the African continent. The least. America will not allow that least military defense on the African continent to have base here in America here. The least. They will not do it. They will not do it. And that is why they want us to remain divided. Because if we are united and have one federal government, and they have governors in various states, just how they have it, that will not happen. Because we will be powerful. It will not happen to have military bases, foreign military bases in Africa. It will not happen. That is why they do not want a unification of Africa. They will always sabotage it. The least military base or the least military in Africa, America will not allow that least military to have base in America. England will not allow that least military in Africa to have base in England. Because you know what? Even weak as they are, they think that certain information will still be exposed. Okay? And when it comes to the protection of a nation, you don't play with the army. You don't play with the army for a secret to be leaked out. When you're talking about a nation, the military comes first. We know citizens, we know the citizens, but the military comes first. So that is why America do not play with our airspace when it comes to military intervention or interference. These colonizers, they know it. They don't. When you talk about a nation, you're talking about the army. We know a nation comprises of people, but we're talking about the army when you're talking about a nation. If you have a nation and you don't have an army, you don't have a nation. The people do not make the nation. The army make the nation because the army protects the jurisdiction of that nation. So how can a continent do not have an army? If there is a war today, Africa will be the victims. Africa always the victim, not even war, but Africa, war in other countries, Africa become the victims. We can't even produce our own food. We're crying, no food, no this, no that, yeah, yo. As a continent, we can't stay on our own. Forget about war is not even in Africa, but war in other countries. Disasters in other countries. But Africa is the one suffering from it. And some political leaders in other African nations are using that as a means to gain political power. To say the government in power, the government is not functioning, the government is not producing right for 8 people. How will the government feed 8 people when the nation that producing the rice is at war? And the nation that producing the rice holding her rice. How will the government feed 8 people? Why is the government going to buy rice to send it to those countries? So at this point of time, no political entity in Africa is supposed to use that as a political means to get in power. Because if you get in power, how are you going to feed the people too? So that how now the government in power that you defeated will now become the opposition and then be preaching the same thing that you are the cause no rice in the country or no food in the country. Whenever there is a conflict, not even on the African continent, the African people feed it because we depend on the colonizer to feed us. What's wrong with us? Who were feeding us before the so-called colonizer? Who were feeding African before the so-called enslaver? How did we eat? How did we make fun? How did we grow food? What was the magnificence of our army? That we have to depend on foreign army to come and create bases. While they're there spying on us, they are there as spies. And they're supporting who they're not supposed to support. Africa. This is not about individual nations. If it have come to a point, we have to wake up. Listen to the drums. Listen to the drums of the colonizer. Listen to the drum of the colonizer. When I say listen, I'm not saying listen and accept. Listen and take note. Listen and find direction and find solution. Other people's problems cannot be the cause of our demise. Let other people's problems be the cause of their demise. Not African demise. Conflict in other people's country. How will that affect Africa, especially when it comes to food security? When and how did we get to that place? But we say Africa is the youngest populated continent in the world. No, not only that, but we say Africa is the most fertile land in the world. Not only that, hold on, but we say Africa is the most resource nation in the world. Then what is wrong with us? Who are leading us? Take note, African leaders. I can't wait to get to that Pan-African Parliament. We will walk the talk. We will work the talk. I'll stop here today, folks. I'll see you on Friday. Please share the live. Like, subscribe. Let us build. That makes sure information like this get to us. I'm not saying get to many. I mean us. Get to us. See you tomorrow.